Hello everyone, it is Jazz here, and I thought I would just go ahead and do my March reading wrap up as well as my to be read for the month of April just a couple days earlier because I can tell that I'm just not going to finish more books in the month of March, and that's okay because I read 5 books already. There's a lot of series books this month, so warning you ahead of time that I cannot go into too much detail on the summaries on some of those unless it's the first book. So just so you know ahead before we start chatting, and let's go on with this fabulous wrap up. The first book that I completed in the month of March was Reawakened by Colleen Hulk. This is the first book in a series, and it is about a young woman named Liliana Young. She is just living her normal life in New York, and her parents are putting a lot of pressure on her to be like successful and all those things because they are like wealthy and all well-to-do. And so to get away from it all, she decides to go to the Metropolitan Museum thinking it's just going to be a normal day. And what ends up happening is she meets an Egyptian prince with godlike powers who has been reawakened from his mummified state, and these two basically have to globetrot and band together with some other peeps to save the world from a great evil. I wanted to really like it, and in terms of the way I felt about this book, the best I could get was it was okay. So everything from the dialogue to the writing style to the use of the mythology and Egyptian mythology to the use of the world building in the story was just all right. Like, it did its job, but it wasn't amazing. And in terms of the characters, it really is just kind of subpar in the character department to me, just because every character in this book is pretty much the same YA character that you've read in every other YA book. Like, the main female character looks and acts like every stereotypical female character in a YA book, and a lot of the male characters are pretty much every stereotypical YA male character, with a little twist, albeit because of the mythology that is inserted into the book. And to a certain extent, usually that wouldn't bug me, but for some reason it just didn't come across very well to me in this book. This book read extremely slow for me. It was definitely one that I had no problem setting down every once in a while, even though I wasn't hating it by any means. But I did feel like I had to set it down just because it was moving so very slowly. Like, I felt like it started off alright, and then about a third into it, I realized that the two main characters, the two love interests, were just eating and talking. I got that the author was trying not to make this book into like an instant love situation, which I did really appreciate that effort. The dialogue to me wasn't as interesting as I wanted it to be for a lot of eating and talking. And then when the action did come in, I did enjoy some of the action bits a lot more. Particularly at the end, I really do feel like it picked up and a lot of interesting stuff started happening at the end. But sort of in the middle, the author has this way, at least for my brain, of writing where she gets the characters in like a bad situation, but then she writes dialogue in this way that sort of would distract me, and I would forget what the bad situation was because I was reading the dialogue, and it, like, they didn't meld for me in my mind. So I'd be like, so what was the trouble that they were in? And then I would just be like, where are they? I'm confused. And also, I feel like the balance of the romance element and the action element wasn't really the right ratio for my personal taste. I don't want you to interrupt my action with a lot of love stuff. Like, finish your action bit and then you can have your romance moment. Like, overall, I did feel like the beginning of the book had real potential. Mythology elements were kind of enjoyable, and I did really enjoy those parts. And also, I did really enjoy the action-y ensemble bit at the end. And I did care whether the characters lived or died, which means something. So I would not be opposed to reading the rest of the books in the series, but I probably wouldn't spend my money on it again. I would either check out the second and third book at the library or see if I could find it on an app like Scribed if it ever arrived on there. So I gave this book 3 stars overall. The next book I completed was The Clockwork Prince by Cassandra Clare, which is the second book in the Infernal Devices series, and obviously because it is the second book in the series, I can't go into too much detail on the summary. I shall just go on and talk about what I thought about it. I wasn't sure what to expect from The Clockwork Prince because I read the first book in the Infernal Devices and I did really like it, but I didn't reach the love zone with it, so I was like, well, I think that I will at least like the second book. Guess what, y'all? I loved it. Really fell in love with the characters. A lot of elements of it did really remind me of classic literature that I really love and enjoy, which was great, even though it, albeit, would be like classic literature with demon hunting, violence, and all that stuff. It's still, you know, kind of the way that certain scenes were set up reminded me of that, which I thought was really cool. This one did have a really excellent balance of romance and action adventure stuff going on, which made me super happy. This one does have quite a bit of love triangle things going on in it, but I felt like it was really well written. Actually, I have to say that in general, as far as I am in the Mortal Instruments and the Infernal Devices series so far, Cassandra Clare's love shapes don't really bother me because it's kind of set in this world where there's only a few people that know about the Shadow World, so everybody's gonna be in love with everybody, and that's okay. I've been just in a steampunk mood, so this definitely really fed my steampunk excitement. Needless to say, I get why everybody else really loves this, and so I gave this 5 stars because it was awesome. Then I finished Timeless, which is the 5th and final Parasol Protectorate book by Gail Carriger. All I can really say about this one is that the main characters, Alexa and Connell, as well as some other peeps, go on a excursion to Egypt. Lots of Egypt this month, and also lots of like steampunk this month. And they have a crazy adventure. Guess what, y'all? I finished a series. I have not done that in a long time. This book, like most of the Parasol Protectorate books, was witty and adventurous and funny and a little sad, and it also had a little bit of adorableness in it. So it was definitely a really fun final book ride. I had such a good time reading it, and I listened to it on audiobook because I've discovered that the best way to read Parasol Protectorate is to listen to it on audiobook and read along, because the reader, Emily Gray, is just like super good. I highly recommend. The only thing that I could say that maybe it wasn't as super was that while I loved the parts where they were having their adventure in Egypt and all the Egypt related scenes, I only really liked the stuff that was the investigation element going on in England. Like, they weren't bad scenes. They were like better than okay. I liked them, but I didn't love them as much as the other Egyptian parts of the book. I still feel like it was a really solid end for the whole entire series, and the parts that I loved far outweighed the parts that I just liked. Decided to give this book 4.5 stars, and I would say overall the whole series is a 4.5 stars, just because I just thought the 4th book was a 4-star book, but the rest of them were like 5 to 4.5 star books in my opinion. So if you like adult steampunk paranormal fantasy, this is definitely the series that I would recommend checking out. The fourth book that I completed in the month of March was a reread of the fourth book in the Anne of Green Gables series by L.M. Montgomery, Anne of the Windy Poplars. This book takes place over the 3 years where Anne and Gilbert are engaged, but they are living apart at the moment because Gilbert is going to medical school and Anne is a principal and a teacher at a high school, and so it's basically just what happens over those 3 years to Anne. So this book does have a little bit different format from some of the other books in the series, and it is because a good portion of the front of the book as well as some other sections of it are basically letters that Anne writes to Gilbert because they are having a long distance relationship, and it switches out of third person into those letters, so it goes kind of back and forth. I do feel like people don't like this element of this fourth book, but I actually don't mind it at all. Granted, it took me like a second to reset my brain for that because I'd totally forgotten there were a lot of letters in this one, but it didn't bother me, and the reason for that is I feel like this author really composed letters well. Like, I feel like she actually thought about what the specific character would write a letter like instead of just writing stuff down that she needed to say. Does that make any sense? So you're really getting insight into how Anne thinks when she writes these letters, and that is really cool because you're kind of learning what she thinks like as an adult. And also, I think if she hadn't put these letters in this book, you would basically not feel the presence of Gilbert in it at all, and that would just be kind of weird. Like I said, I don't really mind the format of the book. It didn't get in the way of me enjoying this book in the series any more than I love the rest of them. And you know I love this book series. I'm like obsessed. This book is particularly sweet because Anne did really help a lot of people in this one and give a lot of good advice in it, and that just made me really super happy. So as usual with an Anne of Green Gables book, I am giving Anne of Windy Poplars 5 stars. We have arrived at the final book that I read in March, and it is the graphic novel adaptation of Madeleine L'Engle's A Wrinkle in Time, which was adapted by Hope Larson. If you don't know the original story of The Wrinkle in Time, it is basically about a young girl named Meg and her brother Charles Wallace. Her mother and father are very smart scientist types, and their father has gone missing for a very, very long time because he worked for the government. And Meg and Charles, with the help of a teenage boy, Calvin O'Keefe, and 3 very interesting women, Mrs. Whatsit, Mrs. Who, and Mrs. Witch, are off to discover where Meg's father is and bring him back home through the funness of time-space travel. I love the Wrinkle in Time book so very much, and I've read 4 of the 5 books in the series. I still need to get to the 5th one. I'm hoping to do that someday soon. But I basically love most of the series that I've read, and I'm just such a big fan of the original book, and when I saw there was a graphic novel version, I was like, I've got to have it. It's not very often that I enjoy reading the graphic novel adaptation as much as reading the normal book that I really love, but in this case I did enjoy reading this just as much as I enjoyed reading A Wrinkle in Time just in print. It has this really cool blue, white, and black art style. I did really like Hope Larson's drawing style. It's quirky, it's her own style, it doesn't look like anybody else's, but it's definitely really clear and clarity, and I really liked how she laid out her paneling for the panels in the book. And the cool thing about reading this is that it was kind of nice to see somebody else's interpretation of what some of the creatures looked like in the story, and it was also really kind of illuminating. Like, I noticed some things that maybe I haven't noticed before when reading the book in print. I enjoyed this immensely, and I would definitely recommend it if you have never read Wrinkle in Time and you just want to read a cool graphic novel, or if you have read the original book before but you want to review the events a little bit in a quick way. This is definitely something to check out. It's also just something to own if you're a big fan like me of the book. So I decided to give this 5 stars as well. Onto my to be read for the month of April. I didn't want to go too crazy on the to be read for the month of April because I am joining the Tome Topple readathon, which is from April 7th to April 20th, and it is about reading those really large books, and I have done a to be read for that readathon, and I will leave the link to that in the description. But I am going to add one more book that I do plan to read for that readathon, which I did not include in that video because I asked a friend for a recommendation of a graphic novel that was over 500 pages that I could read for that readathon, and one of them that he recommended was the graphic novel Zot by Scott McCloud. I think that one collects issues 11 through 36 of that comic. People said that you didn't have to read 1 through 10 to read this one, so I'm hoping they're right. And another book that I'm going to try to work on completing is the audiobook of Billy Idol's memoir, Dancing with Myself. That is my monthly wrap up and to be read. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing my thoughts, which I felt like I babbled out many. And I will see you all on Sunday. Thank you for watching. Bye!